Well, it is pretty strict as far as signage is concerned, and it should be.
Rock and roll. Sounds like we're good.
Any other comment on this then? How about on the issue of farm fields as buffers? Is there a need for more? Does anybody?
Farm fields with nice black cows or
Perfect
perfect cows?
Galloway built it.
Galloway belted cows?
Right.
That's fine.
Are we ready to move to the next policy area then?
Were there any more
To the
discussion
next policy 4.2? Were there any other comments, any?
But just to be sure, so we don't leave it open,
Yeah, well,
are we okay with everybody, do you object to farm fields being considered buffers?
Absolutely.
What
More the better.
What determines a farm field? What is that like?
3 black cows and
I love it. There must be a cow. Permanent. There must be
or a horse, you have a horse.
permanent residence.
You mean like agriculture zoning?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there, I just don't, I know we talked about that because that was a great landscaping option, farmland, you know? But what is farmland? Is it just 25 feet next to a house where they, maybe till up and plant crops for the neighborhood, but that's not really a buffer? And so that's I think, I don't know if we ever established what exactly a farmland landscaping buffer looks like.
No, I think we sent you zoning board
Take care of that one too.
But
Yes,
again, this was
recommendation.
this was specific to parking areas within the scenic corridor. So to me, that's what this is referring to, is 06 on page 95. So to me, to say, put an artificial berm when you have a beautiful pastoral scene behind it doesn't seem to make
I
sense to
agree
me.
on that.
So it's only referring to the scenic corridor overlay districts around parking. That's what this comment is about.
So they can only do it there?
That's what we're talking about this paragraph.
It's not an only, it's there, they would be allowed to do it there as a field and for parking.
I mean, as long as we know what that looks like, I mean, it sounds
In
nice.
general, we didn't want to create these fake berms.
We
What
talked
do you
about
think
it
about
when
what
we
I
talked
said
about it,
somewhere
you
else,
know.
yeah.
Here's,
That's great.
allow farm fields to contribute to rural roadside buffers in lieu of
In
man-made,
the scenic corridor.
and establish a criteria for farm field.
You want to say in the scenic corridor, well, this,
Well, that's what it refers to.
yeah,
Yes.
man-made
Are there-
berms.
And we have to look at it, we talked about it in landscaping, and when we talked about conservation areas too, we talked about it there too.
Is that acceptable language? Sort of looking to see dissenting opinions or modifications to it. Let's go into 4.2 and on to 4.3 if there are any, looking at one more time, do you see anything in 4.3 that needs to be re-reviewed? or-
Yeah, the gated community comment. Discuss if gated communities are supported by the comp plan.
Here we are. We have gated communities, to see any, and do we talk about this during the residential piece, or, and do we think about this when we get into the residential?
We're,
Not sure what.
and this is the context of the transportation policy area right now.
And this is access.
Is there a,
Well, I didn't see it supported in this part of the comp plan, but I don't know if it is in the residential part, since we haven't gotten it yet. I think it's not.
So I'm a little, do we want to, we're trying to make a recommendation that, or interpret the comp plan by saying it doesn't allow or shouldn't allow for gated communities?
Along,
Well, we do have gated communities in some of the areas, one off of Stanley Hill Road here.
Deer Meadow.
Deer Meadow.
That's great back
access.
Yeah, I don't.
Have you been in there?
Yeah.
Sneak in there?
Many years ago.
Yeah.
I've had a problem. I don't think there's a complicated comp plan on gated communities. I don't.
Comprehensive planning, that the specific policy is silent on
Right.
gated communities.
What was the issue?
I forgot what it was.
Public
Okay.
safety.
Public safety, yeah.
Is it about safety?
Interesting, I bet
Access
I
to
bet they
major
have
roads.
to open to a fire.
They have Knox boxes on them is what they
Yeah, I
have.
think that was what I was just asking, was
So-
how to get in.
So gated communities, I think, I sent you a standard for a gated community. I think the most important thing with those is making sure that there's some kind of turnaround area. So one, they can't have that gate right up to the right of way on the street because people shouldn't queue in the street while the gate is opening. So the gate will be set back, but if somebody accidentally turns in there because they think it's a street or they're just lost or for whatever reason, they shouldn't have to back out into the highway in order to get turned around. So there's a standard that will show you how to design an entrance to a gated community. I think the thing that maybe we want to try to prevent is someone doing a gated community where they have a connection in between one road and another road, where having connectivity in between those roads would benefit the community as a whole. And so we wouldn't allow a gate maybe in that kind of circumstance, but for other circumstances where they're just going to have a gated community, there'll be private streets that they maintain. And they'll go back and cul-de-sac and they'll be gated back there, but maybe we don't allow private connections in between two public connections. It's basically private streets can't connect to public streets. This would be
The
what I would
standards
say.
that you used, where were they from? Were they Greensboro or DOT?
Yeah, that's what we did.
The Greensboro standards?
Uh-huh.
No, I
Let's
think
see.
the parking, that's access, that makes complete sense. And that's a design part of what the community would look like.
Yeah, and
And those
I'm sorry.
gates need to be set back more than just a car length too. They probably have to handle a small delivery truck.
The design I sent has 100 feet.
Yeah.
And there's Knox boxes going back to that. I mean, those are for emergency personnel, so they pull up and they got there's a key standard for our state, and they all have them. They put them in there, they open, they stay open until the key's removed, and so they'll have access.
But I don't think a gated community detracts from a rural country setting if it's done right.
So this is about
Harry has just
safety.
crafted some language.
Yeah.
Is there, looking at it, to ensure access and egress to and from gated communities is safe by using standards such as those employed by Greensboro's ordinances? Is there general agreement with that as a recommendation?
Unfortunately, we don't know what Greensboro's ordinances are.
Without, yeah.
Very
Does not mean we want to be
I bet you
like
they're poorly written.
Greensboro. I'm just being transparent here because this came from Greensboro ordinance and it makes sense. This, the ordinance for gated communities.
Probably came from Greensboro's ordinance.
But the emphasis on
Is-
safety and not on Greensboro.
Yeah.
Right. And just functionality. I mean, if they own a piece of land that makes, and you have two highways that have no connecting street anywhere for miles, and then there's a piece of land, and then they have a gate at one of those streets, and then they got a gate down at the other street, well, now you're blocking access, now you're creating something that, say there's somebody having a heart attack up there, it would behoove us to send an ambulance up that way to get to them 5 minutes faster. And so we wouldn't permit a private street connecting to public streets like that, but that's what I'm saying. So it's safety and all around, that just makes a whole lot of sense. And so that's kind of how we have it set.
It's part of our ordinance right now.
Right.
It's where a private street.
Cedar Hollow, is it Cedar Hollow that does that between
Yeah.
150 and Skates?
Any further
Yeah.
comment on this area? Let's, are we better move on to the next policy?
Greensboro's ordinance has that, all of that spelled out, right, Ryan? It doesn't reference Raleigh's ordinance or something.
And
Yeah,
I
those
would-
are inferior cities.
I was trying to identify it without saying, based on what Ryan said, but
According to Ryan.
Okay. You ready to go further? Go further? Any other comments on any of the other policies in policy area 4, transportation?
I'm just kind of going through and make sure.
Carrie, I noted you have one that was in sort of a peach color.
Yeah, the
For
land use
research.
plan.
Said research to be done during the course of this committee's work.
Correct, when we
Bring
have our
something
second
back.
go around.
Okay?
There were two in that color.
Any other that,
Did I miss something?
Was that the land use plan?
Yeah.
4A?
Oh,
There's another one further along. Right there.
yeah. I don't know that we got consensus on that or not, there's discussion, but is it a recommendation of this committee to adopt a land use plan?
Didn't we ask for an
To-
expert?
to-
or-
And adopting a land use plan
But that was
is,
after more information. Yeah, this was one of the ones I
Yeah.
thought where we wanted more, someone to
Yeah.
come talk to us about it.
yeah,
And get some examples.
exactly,
Or
what that means and how it's done. Okay,
or if we really want to have it
what
as a
is it
recommendation.
involved? Okay,
but if I recall the discussion before, this may sit as one of those recommendations in addition to your recommendations regarding the UDO.
Correct.
It's
right, sort of a set aside, but it comes up so much that
it's a big, big additional recommendation.
And I think this could be something that maybe Jesse can speak to when he's here about just the basics
Sounds like
of
more
what's
work for
involved.
the zoning.
Okay? Anything further? Any other comments on items that you see on policy area 4?
That's what that means.
The recommendations that you would like to revisit or rediscuss? Okay, is that, are we at the bottom?
We are.
So I move we adopt these draft policy recommendations for 4,
Okay.
policy area 4. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Who seconds that one?
Ryan.
Okay, Brian.
Need a second to make up this
Okay.
listed in there.
Moving on to policy area 7. The policy area regarding parks and recreation facilities.
By the way, I'll mention real quickly and tell Ryan, I saw today, the planning representative from the MPO, Craig McKinney, was in the office about something else, and I gave him this spreadsheet, as well as for policy area 4, the transportation. I gave our transportation recommendations to the urban transportation planning folks to give us any feedback that they might have. I also gave them the sidewalk and trail network one for their trail planning person to look at.
Cool, you let me know if he gets you any problems.
I will let you know if Craig gives me any trouble. He seemed very happy to look at it and liked the corroborative.
Oh, it's great. In Washington.
So,
Okay?
and I'll give him this revision line.
Re-reviewing policy area 7, parks and recreation improvements. Does anybody have anything that particularly you see that needs to be re-reviewed or discussed further?
Well,
Or you have,
the third, well, not the third one, but the third one down kind of talks about the land use plan again. So should that be a pink because we're waiting on more information?
Yep.
I don't know if everybody's aware that they're part of phase 2, there was an additional parking lot, and they completed construction on that a couple weeks ago.
For
At
the
the
Summerfield Athletic Park.
Yeah, athletic park, yeah, I'm just sitting here looking at it.
I like that new entrance.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's much safer than I think the old one would have been with the new road. And the parking, we were, during tournaments, having a lot of problems with overflow out on the road. It was getting pretty dangerous, so.
They tried to charge us to go to a soccer practice one day. No, we're going to soccer.
Well, good.
Because they charge for baseball, not for soccer.
The only comment I had on, is really on policy 7.2. I kind of think that the UDO should be, and I wrote this word down, agnostic to town land acquisition plans. I think this is a development ordinance. It should be fact-based, and when you start to talk about land acquisitions and how towns buy it and mechanisms for identifying them, I think that goes a little beyond what a UDO is supposed to do, and it should be something that the town develops, maybe as part of the land use plan, but I don't think this is something which we should recommend to include language in the UDO itself about how to buy land.
Is that an example of where the comprehensive plan and the UDO aren't gonna maybe match? I mean, that makes
Well, it's
sense.
not as a conflict, it's just that.
Not conflict, I'm just saying.
It's a development ordinance is, you know, how tall is the sign supposed to be and how far back from the road. You should go down to the Bank of North Carolina, open up accounts that you can buy land. I mean, that doesn't
So
make sense.
what about the identifying and the management of the plan?
My suggestion is to change the wording to this, after guidance from town leadership, make sure that whatever they decide is reflected in the ordinance.
But
as
why
far
would
as
an ordinance tell us, a developer, how the town wants to buy land, and do public land?
It talks about, there's opportunities in subdivision ordinances, there's various statutory opportunities for private developers to enter into agreements with towns
Sure,
for.
but the existing ordinance still apply in those cases, right?
It would just reference that opportunity is all, like school sites reference the opportunity to set aside a school site, and if we did it, it would say, for instance, we have to come up with a plan within a certain amount of time.
Yeah, Bob, you make a good point. The reason I have that in there is just because it was out of sync with that policy in the plan.
No, I think the intent is good, and I think that could be like a recommendation on that the town should have a land use plan, or to consider one. We should consider having a spelled out way to acquire land and how to do it and how to fund it.
Yeah.
There will be
But
some
may not
impact
have a
on the.
But that seems like that's a separate policy document than a development ordinance.
Yeah.
To me, anyway.
Maybe we
Yeah.
just have something simple and short and sweet, where we just say sorry, it just disappeared on me. With the identification and acquisition and management of public land shall be under the guidance of town leadership and the town public, or something like that. Something where it's public involvement and town leadership, and basically we leave it to just that.
Establishes policy
Basically,
and response.
the identification, acquisition, and management of public land shall be guided by town leadership and public input or public feedback or something like that. So those things are handled by council with feedback from the public. That's it.
Is that
That's all we
the-
said.
To Bob's point though, is that, maybe Carrie can answer this better than any of us, is it the right place for it to be? I mean, it's asked for by the comp plan, but maybe it lives in another document, or it's, right?
There's
Is that one?
definitely place in the ordinance that would support such a policy,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And it's not the main vehicle, but all it is making sure to carry it through. Whenever the town should adopt such a policy, it will be carried out in a variety of ways, one of which could be through the ordinance.
So maybe if it is referenced, then somewhere in the ordinance, it should say how it's handled, and that should say that it's handled by input from town council and public feedback or public.
Yeah, I mean, it makes complete sense to do, and we come up this later on where the town thinks this is where a school would go, or another park, or a recreation area, or athletic area. I mean, this wraps up in a little bit, and that makes perfect sense.
There's land acquisition now, the public has no,
There's no policy on it,
and the public really has no option to give any input. That's totally decided by the council, isn't that right?
Oh,
You want
no,
public hearings,
I
though.
wouldn't say that.
Not for, not
I wouldn't
for-
say that. The comprehensive plan suggests such a
You
policy,
did for the parkland.
and I wouldn't imagine the council implementing such a policy without public input.
Which policy, sorry?
A policy toward acquiring public lands, what's the policy?
So that to me makes a lot more sense.
Other municipalities around the state and country might have a part of the budget as a Parks and Recreation Acquisition Fund, or
It may be
Or
stated in a
oftentimes
master
a bond,
plan or some
right.
future long-term planning goal. We don't have any, currently, we don't have any goals to acquire any additional property at this point.
Do you want me to
No
say, should the
specific
town
goals.
leadership establish policy for the acquisition and management of public lands, include language that supports it? Would that be better?
As
Well,
opposed to the word once.
Uh-huh.
if,
Well,
Should town leadership establish policies for the acquisition?
well, at what point are they going to establish it? How would you, if you don't do it under this vehicle, what would you do it under? So you're just saying if it happens, then it'll be managed this way, but then how will it ever happen? I'm just saying, don't put it out there if it's useless.
I think it's useless.
Well, it's
Well,
saying that
let's
you,
make it
that
happen.
you've read it in the
You mean
comp
it's
plan.
useless at, in it all the way?
Well, I mean, I think the town wants to acquire land because of an obligation to hold public hearings so the public can have input on whether we buy land or not. Okay? If somebody wants to donate land to the town, then just take it.
Right.
We don't currently have that, have a policy.
Yeah. But I don't envision the town acquiring land without having a substantial investment without a public hearing.
Right. Well, then, so let's just say it.
The hardware store in town didn't have public hearings to buy that.
And a lot of your closed minutes meetings are for land.
Well, for property consideration.
Right.
For individual property
Yeah,
consideration, but not for
we
policy.
have to do that because as soon as somebody hears that we may be interested in something for a particular
Yeah.
purpose, they'll raise the price. And then
The
those,
public has-
and then those minutes are released at a later time
Right.
when appropriate.
These are all things that should not be addressed in the development ordinance.
yes, if I read the intent, Bob's intent and the commentaries, that the UDO may not be the vehicle for accomplishing 7.2.
It really isn't.
But there's some provisional language here that when and if, or should, if the town leadership does establish a policy outside the UDO, the UDO ought to reflect some mechanism to carry that out. You comfortable with that?
That's what I think I should do.
I think you're giving sort of a sense of
Or
the
do
committee.
you want to say, include language that supports any policies for, or you could blow it off altogether, but I'd rather not forget the fact that we might want to capture anything that we can in the ordinance.
It's a little awkward because the policy itself says getting out ahead of development. That implies a future acquisition, and the UDO is a development ordinance for what do you do when somebody brings in a proposal for a subdivision or a zoning, or, so it's at the time of development. It's, as an outsider, it may be, it definitely is for town council and town leadership, and there may be another committee that is working on issues of parks and that sort of thing. You comfortable with this, just going forward? Any other policies within policy area 7 that you want to look at further, discuss further? You see, in many of these areas, there were no comments from your review earlier.
Well, that's because they were things that were. that-
Already
that-
covered.
that already-
That's it,
Yeah.
Right,
that's it.
that was it.
That's it, yeah.
Actually, I think it's really, really, really thorough for this committee to address this policy area at all, but I think it's commendable too. to do it, and not just leave it to town.
Yeah, I think we
You know,
have
it's like
on
we-
the same thing.
Okay, are we ready to,
Do we have a motion to accept these and forward to the review in March?
Some of it,
Millie?
I know,
We have a second?
I'll second.
Got that? All in favor? Anyone opposed?
Millie's motion, Beth, second?
Is this recommendations now? Is that what we're saying? Or that we're gonna look at them again before we make them a draft?
These are draft
draft?
I mean, this is
They're all
draft,
all draft.
all the.
It's draft recommendations to move on, and then come back and look at it, and all of the other recommendations are in March.
Right, I just meant, we're not gonna look at them next week or next time.
No.
No, those are done till March.
So we're now on to, you're starting into policy area 8, attractive community appearance. As I think a number of you pointed out in your comments, you've already looked at that once before, and you may go back into it again. But this is some specific policy language in policy area 8 that you were looking at. And we're first in 8.1 about lands.
Lighting.
8.1 about exterior lighting. And the first recommendation is to include all lighting types in the list of elements that need to be corrected during a remodel.
Not just parking.
Right. Okay, any commentary on that? Right, ready to move on? Carrie's note, and this is something that you're going to be bringing back to the committee?
Well, I don't know if I'll be able to bring it back to this. I guess it
Okay.
depends on timing and whether the same, I'm trying to partner with Oak Ridge in updating our ordinances together.
But the sense of the comment was make sure to provide for night sky or reducing the light pollution.
And the reason I made this comment here was because this person was balancing, night sky is important, but we also need safety.
Right.
And so that's over my head.
Okay.
And we have a really excellent resource in the area. A
Okay.
couple of excellent resources, actually.
Well, I was gonna say, anything that's dark sky ordinance is very difficult. It makes it very hard to try to deal with. There's a few neighborhoods, like in Clemens, in Salem, the maximum lighting you can have is 40 watt. Everything has to be pointed down, so it's very limiting. You can't have any landscape lighting. I mean, it is very strict, it is very harsh to try to require that. I mean, and I understand why they do it, but it is very limiting from a light perspective of how much light and what kind of light and the volume of light. It's very specific, and it makes it challenging.
Will you participate in this? I think I've asked you before.
Okay.
So Priscilla can represent the committee in that work? I mean, we could bring it back to the whole committee if we need to. Priscilla.
On to, are we ready to go to 8.2, landscaping improvements? This is about off-street parking. And clarification that off-street parking is on-site, the same thing. Any comment on that?
I'll correct this spelling later.
Shall we go to policy area 8.3? This deals with utilities should be placed underground in all new residential and non-residential developments, with exceptions for small individual lot development and small scale developments.
Gary, you know, the underground lighting, just a curiosity question. So the underground wiring and whatnot, I mean, what is the life cycle on that wiring underground versus?
Underground, just, underground's more expensive.
Oh, yeah.
No, I know it's more expensive,
It's more
but how long
expensive.
does it
Yeah.
last?
If it follows all the standards, I don't know what life cycle the standards are for, do you have any idea?
It definitely lasts a lot longer than anything that's gonna be sitting out exposed. And they don't have trees or ice or anything else, sun banging on it. So it'll last longer, it looks nicer, it cleans up
Oh, I love
the
it.
chute, yeah, but it's expensive. That's
I
the
just
trick.
don't, I don't know, but I can find out.
Just when it's done well, it's done in conduits so that it can be, multiple utilities can coexist in the same.
And it's room for future, additional,
Is
yeah,
that our
they're
current-
designed for additional.
Is that our current ordinance?
No, this is a new,
So
a
if
new ordinance to
So if a
require.
new neighborhood was built today, they could have above ground
Correct.
utilities?
We probably wouldn't let them know, would we?
How would you stop them? There's no ordinance there. No one's, I don't think anyone's ever come in and proposed above ground ordinance that I can recall, or utilities.
I'm thinking of Trudy and the zoning, billiard zoning along, where's Penn, the other one, and they were off a Budge Road,
All right,
and
let's
they were
say
over, had,
5 houses or more.
Yeah, what is
Then you
smaller
gotta do-
scale?
Yeah, smaller
Do we have a
scale,
definition?
say five or less is small.
we can use the same minor, major subdivision criteria then, which is 5.
So would you want to say that instead?
Should be consistent.
Yeah.
Well, but existing landholders aren't gonna be affected
No.
by the ordinance either way, right?
No.
So it's just new people buying property with the idea of developing.
But it's
most
more
of
than
the
five.
Small,
Yeah.
small
but
developments,
why?
the new developments now are using underground.
Why not?
You know,
If
I think
someone's
most of them
doing a
are
five-
starting to use the underground.
It's a cost
Right,
factor,
because
but,
of the appearance.
you know, are you trying to keep it rural or not?
You're underground too,
Been underground.
Because if you just do two,
And we're
Since
underground.
94.
they could
That's
just
when
like,
they built
Any,
I see what you're saying, but I do
And
small
we're
and really
small,
large,
but we're
and
underground.
really
We only
small
have
do get
26
exempt from a
houses.
lot of stuff, just
Well,
as
make it
cost
dollars.
balancing kind of thing.
It
And
does.
I see what you're
It
saying,
does.
but if you
And
had
the next
5 houses
recommendation
or maybe just
has to
5
do
houses
with
or 4 houses around a cul-de-sac,
extreme
you could
conditions
service that probably, just one pole.
and a call for criteria
It wouldn't be like this. Or
for what constitutes extreme conditions.
So it'd be pretty minor for them to just do a little power line off.
so that 5,
Which one do you want?
less than 5 lots is the same definition as,
Lots in the back of that one street.
As a major, minor subdivision.
so 4, 3, 2, or 1 fit within
Considered a
that.
smaller scale development.
But so
And I
just-
wrote consistency with subdivision definitions, so it's clear.